Kosen 1. You were removed to grow roots.
Losing them shattered the map, so your real path could appear. At first it did not feel like revelation. It felt like impact. Like the floor beneath your name, your routine, your certainty, had quietly given way, while everyone else kept walking, as if the building were still standing. The email was short. The meeting was shorter. A polite voice. A rehearsed apology. A phrase about restructuring. A sentence about appreciation. Then silence. And just like that, the version of your life that had seemed stable enough to lean on was gone. Not just the paycheck. Not just the title. Not just the daily rhythm. Something deeper collapsed. The identity you had stitched around usefulness. The story you told yourself about where you were going. The borrowed timeline that made you believe progress always had to look visible. The strange thing is, the deepest grief was not even about the job. It was about the map. The future you had drawn in your mind depended on that road continuing straight. Promotion. Security. Recognition. The slow climb. The familiar office lights. The messages. The meetings. The quiet validation of being needed. When that disappeared, it felt less like losing work and more like being erased from your own imagined future. And this is where many chosen ones misunderstand the season they are in. They think collapse means failure. But sometimes collapse is the only force strong enough to break the architecture of a life that was too small for the soul trying to live inside it. You were not removed because your story ended. You were removed because roots cannot deepen in a pot that has become too tight. A tree kept in the wrong container can still look healthy from above. Green leaves, strong branches, even fruit. But beneath the surface, the roots circle the same limited space until growth itself becomes impossible. Then one day, the pot must break. Violently sometimes. Messily, almost always. So the roots can finally touch real ground. That is what this season is. Not punishment. Not abandonment. Not proof that you misheard life. This is transplantation. And transplanting always looks cruel before it looks wise. Because before the tree can rise, it must first lose the shape that made it recognizable. That is why this season feels so personal. The loss of a job has a way of reaching into places salary never touched. It changes how you wake up, how you answer simple questions, how you explain yourself to family, how you sit in your own house at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, hearing the clock tick louder than it ever did before. The world keeps asking what you do. But the deeper question haunting you now is, who are you when what you did is gone? That is the real rebuilding. Not career. Identity. Because if your worth was secretly rented from performance, then losing the stage will feel like losing yourself. Yet this is the sacred brutality of beginning again. The collapse did not create your emptiness. It revealed where you had been outsourcing your sense of self. And revelation, though painful, is merciful. You remember the first mornings after it happened. The body still moved by old habits. Waking early. Reaching for the phone. A split second of forgetting. Then the memory crashing back in before your feet touched the floor. You no longer belonged to the schedule that had once dictated your existence. No inbox waiting. No team thread. No urgent call. No meetings. No calendar blocks. Just space. And space can feel unbearable when your life has been built around noise. This is why many people rush too quickly into the next thing. They do not want to feel the silence between identities. But silence is where buried roots begin to listen. The loss created an emptiness that terrified you, yet hidden inside that emptiness was your first honest encounter with yourself in years. Not the efficient version. Not the capable version. Not the impressive version. Just the unguarded human being beneath the role. Tired. Disappointed. A little ashamed. Quietly angry. And strangely relieved in ways you were afraid to admit. Because if you're honest, part of you had already been dying there.
The job fed your bills, yes.
But it had started starving your spirit. The work no longer stretched your becoming. The environment rewarded your compliance more than your calling. The routine made survival look like success. You were functioning. You were praised. You were stable. But beneath all of it, your deeper self had stopped moving. So life did not merely remove your job. It interrupted your numbness. That is why this season carries two truths at once. Grief and liberation. You can mourn what was lost and still admit it was no longer alive for you. That paradox is where mature rebuilding begins. Not from denial, from honesty. The first brick of rebuilding is not ambition. It is truth. Truth about what exhausted you. Truth about what you tolerated. Truth about what you abandoned in yourself to remain acceptable. Truth about how often you mistook familiarity for destiny.
The practical lesson hidden inside this collapse is simple but demanding.
Rebuild from values, not from panic. Most people rebuild from fear. They chase the nearest replacement. Any paycheck. Any title. Any familiar structure that can anesthetize uncertainty. But panic rebuilds the same prison with different wallpaper. You are being asked for something rarer. To rebuild from roots. Ask yourself, what kind of life allows me to remain whole? What kind of work expands my inner life instead of draining it? What skills are truly mine, even without a company name beside them? What way of living feels aligned, not merely approved? These questions are not decorative. They are foundational. Because when everything external falls away, what remains is what was actually yours. Your discipline. Your mind. Your resilience. Your pattern recognition. Your intuition. Your capacity to learn. Your ability to serve. Your hunger to become more honest. The job was never the source. It was only one container. The source is what survived the loss. And what survived is stronger than what ended. There will be days in this rebuilding where shame tries to narrate the story. It will whisper, "You should be further ahead. Others are moving faster. You are behind. You wasted years." But shame measures life by comparison. Roots measure life by depth. The oak does not envy the bamboo. The mountain does not race the river. Different forms of becoming require different seasons underground. Your season underground is not empty. It is architectural. The invisible work is still work. Learning new skills when nobody is applauding. Sending applications after rejection. Building something from your own ideas. Studying late into the night. Facing your fear of irrelevance. Discovering talents your old environment never had room to reveal. This is not the glamorous part of the story. This is the root work. The part no one celebrates while it is happening. The part that looks unimpressive from the outside. The part where your life appears smaller, even as your inner world becomes more expansive. And yet this is the part that determines whether the next chapter can actually hold your future. Because elevation without roots creates fragility. You are not being delayed. You are being anchored.
Remember the days when money fear tightened your chest.
The math. The bills. The practical terror. Collapse is never purely symbolic. It has real consequences. Rent. Food. Obligations. Family expectations. The humiliating calculations in your head. This is where the rebuilding becomes deeply human. Not abstract. Not poetic. Real. You learn quickly what matters. What expenses are ego? What desires were compensation? What habits were avoidance? What purchases were trying to buy emotional relief? Scarcity, while painful, has a brutal honesty to it. It strips illusion. And once illusion is stripped, wisdom can finally enter. You begin to understand that zero is not emptiness. Zero is clarity. Zero shows you what remains when status disappears. Zero teaches invention. Zero forces intimacy with your own resourcefulness. Zero introduces you to the version of yourself who can create under pressure instead of consuming comfort. That self is powerful. That self had been sleeping beneath convenience. Sometimes the most sacred part of losing everything familiar is discovering that your mind is still fertile in barren soil. Ideas start arriving. Not because certainty returned. Because dependence dissolved. You begin seeing possibilities you once ignored because your old path was too loud. A small business idea. A skill you always sidelined. A service people quietly need. A creative instinct. A teaching gift. A leadership capacity. A voice. A system. A vision. What if the collapse was not merely taking something away? What if it was clearing visual noise so you could finally recognize what had been trying to emerge through you? This is why the emotional center of this season is not devastation. It is rearrangement. Your inner world is being restructured around what is essential rather than what is expected. And yes, some days it still hurts. There are moments when memory seduces you. The old routine suddenly seems safer than it truly was. The old stress looks manageable now that uncertainty is present. The old version of yourself becomes romanticized. Be careful. Pain often edits the past into something kinder than it was. Do not return inwardly to rooms your spirit had already outgrown. Rebuilding requires that you stop negotiating with expired versions of yourself. You are not here to restore the old building. You are here to understand why it collapsed and what kind of foundation deserves your next creation. This is where humility becomes strength. Starting from zero teaches you to separate talent from ego. You realize titles once introduced you before your character had to. Now your consistency must speak. Your discipline must speak. Your integrity must speak. Your craftsmanship must speak. This is harder and infinitely more powerful. Because what is built from essence survives what is built from image. There is a night in every rebuilding journey where the loneliness feels louder than hope. No one sees the internal war. No one fully understands the grief of becoming unknown to your own former life. People offer surface encouragement, but they cannot feel the weight of starting again when your age, your history, your expectations all whisper that you should already be established. This is where many people shrink. But this is where chosen ones become real. Not when life is affirming them. When life removes applause and they still choose to continue. That continuation is sacred. Every application sent. Every skill sharpened. Every morning you rise without external structure and still create one for yourself. Every moment you resist bitterness. Every decision to keep your heart open instead of cynical. These are not small acts. These are the rituals of internal kingship. You are learning self-leadership. And self-leadership is the root system beneath every lasting external success. The world may later call this season your comeback. But you will know better. This was your formation. The season where you stopped mistaking momentum for meaning. The season where your identity learned to stand without leaning on institutions. The season where uncertainty became a teacher instead of a threat. One day, the work that comes from this chapter will feel different. Not because it is easier, because it is truer. You will no longer choose based solely on fear. You will listen for alignment. You will recognize when environments ask you to betray your own nervous system. You will notice where your creativity shrinks. You will refuse spaces that only value your output and not your humanity. This is what rebuilding from wisdom looks like. It changes your standards. The loss of your old life was expensive. Make sure it buys discernment. Do not waste this pain by merely surviving it. Extract instruction from it. What did the collapse expose? What habits made you dependent? What skills do you need now? What parts of your confidence were built on borrowed certainty? What dream kept tapping the glass while you were too busy to notice? These questions turn ruin into architecture. And architecture is what this chapter is really about. Not finding something quickly. Becoming someone solid. The roots are growing now. Quietly. Without announcement. Without proof visible to everyone else. But the unseen work is changing everything. One day people will meet the future version of you and assume the growth happened suddenly. They will see the confidence, the wisdom, the new work, the grounded presence, the calm authority. They will call it luck, timing, opportunity. But you will remember the underground season, the days of uncertainty, the nights of private fear, the hours spent rebuilding discipline, the humility of asking for help, the courage of learning from zero, the decision to trust depth over speed. That is what made the next life possible. So if today you are sitting in the rubble of a lost job, a collapsed identity, and a future that no longer looks recognizable, do not insult this moment by calling it the end. This is the soil. Messy, dark, uncelebrated, necessary. Seeds do not become trees in open air. They begin in burial. And burial only resembles ending to those who do not understand roots. You were removed to grow where visibility could no longer distract you. You were emptied so essence could speak. You were brought back to zero so your life could finally be built on what cannot be taken. So breathe. Not because the path is obvious. Because your feet are finally touching real ground. The map shattered. Good. Now the path can emerge from within instead of being borrowed from the expectations of others. And when your next chapter rises, it will not merely be bigger. It will be yours. Affirmations. 1. I am not starting over, I am starting from wisdom. 2. What collapsed cleared space for what truly belongs to me. 3. My roots are growing stronger in every unseen moment. Blessing. May the one who guides hidden seasons bless your rebuilding with clarity, courage, and grounded vision. May every closed door reveal deeper self-trust, and may what you build from this zero be stronger than anything fear could have preserved. May your hands find meaningful work, your heart remain open, and your roots grow so deep that no future storm can uproot the life now meant for you.
Amen.